It's the year 2020. It's the start of a brand new calendar year, and it's the No Nay Never podcast. Hello, welcome back. Happy New Year, listeners. We're here. There's been a bit of a hiatus, is that the right word? A bit of a break from podcast recording over the Christmas period as fixtures fell thick and fast, and the team were all over the place, and we just basically took a decision to have a break over the festive period and come back fresh and relaxed in the new year to get back into a routine of regular podcasts and to dissect everything claret and blue. So I hope you all had a very happy Christmas. You managed to get some downtime away from work and with your family or friends, or however you enjoy spending the Christmas period. Team No Nay Never certainly did. I think we all managed to get a decent break, so that's good. But we can't just stay on holiday forever as much as we'd like to. We have to get back to work, and I am joined this evening by regular panellists Tom Whitaker and Richard Steele. Tom, Richard, welcome back and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Natalie. Good to be back on.
Happy New Year, nice to be back. Wish we had some more happy news to talk about.
Well, yes, that does line things up quite nicely, actually, does it, Tom? What in the world are we going to talk about tonight? Because since we last spoke to you, there has been a bit of a roller coaster of emotions when it comes to performances on the pitch. There have been shenanigans off the pitch with the transfer window that never was, even though it's only the 8th of January as we record this podcast. We've had the FA Cup where we didn't draw City away and we didn't go out to lower league opposition in the first round that we could play in. And we've just had a general weird feeling about our beloved Clarets. So I think we're going to have a little bit of a catch-up today. We're going to talk generally about what on earth is going on with our boys. We're going to have a look at the performances on the field. We're going to have a look at the transfer window because I think we have to. And we're also going to delve into that FA Cup game against Posh and see how we feel about the FA Cup, generally speaking. And actually the FA Cup being a bit of a high point for us over the Christmas period. So, since we spoke last, the Clarets have had we've had a very heavy Christmas fixture list. We have started off with 3 back-to-back defeats in that awful week, if you remember, where we had that awful game away at Spurs. So we had Palace at home, which we lost 2-0. We then had City at home, which we lost 4-1, and we went to Spurs away and got beat 5-0. Now, sandwiched in between that, Clarets had a little bit of a happy spike where we had 2 back-to-back 1-0 wins against Newcastle and Bournemouth, 2 very important wins that just gave us a little bit of breathing space. But unfortunately, that was then followed by 3 more defeats, 1-0 away at Everton, 2-0 at home against United, and probably the worst out of all of them, the 2-1 home loss against Villa. What I think, and Tom, I will start with you, what I think is the overall impression of all of those games, even the ones that we won, is that the performances on the field have not quite been up to scratch. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, 100%. I think especially from an attacking point of view. I remember talking on the podcast early this season. I think it was after the Villa game. We'd just come from behind to nick a draw at Brighton. We came from behind twice against Villa to get a draw. The away game, obviously, earlier in the season I'm talking about. And I remember saying at that point that it seemed like there was a bit of a difference to last season in that we had more goals in the team. It seemed like we had a bit more of an attacking thrust. It seemed like we had more sort of second options. We had options off the bench if we were chasing the game. We had a bit more of an attacking, maybe not flair, but a bit more of an attacking thrust about us. See, then later in the season we had the back-to-back 3-0 wins. That must be a long, long time since we did that in the top flight. But that all seems to have gone by the wayside. I think we're very much reliant on the 2 centre forwards to be in good form for us to be scoring goals. And Barnes, I've heard a lot of talk that he's playing with an injury. Certainly looks like he's nowhere near the player he was at the back end of last season or the start of this season. Chris Wood, I think he's playing quite well, but he's very isolated, and he's not getting much help He's never been at his best as a back-to-goal striker, but he's being asked to do that more and more, especially with the fact that he's having to prop up Barnes in some regards. And I think what this period has really exposed is the weakness in our midfield. If we haven't got the outlet, if the centre forwards aren't winning the headers, a lot of teams are going 3 at the back against us, because I think, and certainly Dean Smith, when we played Villa at home recently, I think he cottoned on to the fact that with 2 strikers, 3 centre halves tend to nullify them well if we're just playing the long ball. And at the minute, there just doesn't seem to be another option. The midfield is really weak. There's 2 players in there who are very similar. I think Cork and Westwood are both shuttlers. I don't think either is good at putting their foot on the ball and spraying it around. I don't think either can come and get it off the back 4 and spray it around without being pressed by the midfield. When we had a player like Defoe, you could trust him to take that extra touch to move it in a sensible and crucially move it forward. And you don't get that from the midfield we've got at the minute. I think one thing that is perhaps a little bit of a glimmer for hope is that I think the back 4 have by and large been playing well. The first half against Villa, obviously they weren't great, but Everton away, I think all 5 of the defensive units played really well. Man United away, we were mostly untroubled. There was obviously the horrendous mistake. Man United at home, I should say. Sorry, there was obviously the horrendous mistake by Charlie Taylor for the first goal, and then we got caught on the counter attack. But it wasn't like we were leaking goals like a sieve in those games. And obviously the back 4 kept us in the Newcastle and Bournemouth games for us to nick the goals at the end. So I think if you were going to say there's one glimmer of hope at the minute, it's definitely the back 5, the way they're working as a unit. But I think, as the Villa game showed, if we're going to be overly reliant, then that's not going to last forever. So we really need Wood and one of Barnes or Rodriguez to start playing themselves back into form soon. And if we're not going to see improvement from those 2 midfielders, that's something that we really need to be having a look at in the window as well for me.
Yeah, well, I'm going to stick with the defence to start off with. I'm going to bring Richard in here. I didn't really want to stop that flow then, because that was an epic monologue. I was very much enjoying that. I was like, I might just take the night off and let Tom have a bit of a rant here. I'm not sure everybody shares your optimism, Tom, about and the performances from the back 5. I know this is only one game, but certainly the defence had an absolute shocker away at Spurs. I think we all remember that Son goal where there literally just was not a single tackle made all the way through from him taking the ball and out. When we were on an attack, running most length of the pitch and putting it into the back of the net. There's also been various claims that Nick Pope could have done better in certain goals, and a general feeling that at the moment there seems to be a bit of a conflict. I don't mean in a personality way, but between me and Tarkowski, they're not maybe gelling as much as they used to. Richard, you can't really get away from the fact that we are shipping goals for fun at the moment. In those 6 defeats that we've had over the last 9, there's a lot of goals gone in there. Where do you stand on this disappointment about our defence? And in particular, what I'd like you to concentrate on is the fullbacks. A lot of criticism about the fullbacks and a lot of people wanting them to get replaced. And during these games, we've seen various combinations of Lawton and Bardsley and Peters and Taylor. Where are you sitting with our defence?
I'll come on to your point about the fullbacks in a minute. I think our defence has been so unusual this season. There's been games where, like you said, Newcastle, Bournemouth, Watford, where we've looked really solid in defence. It seems to me that when we go 1-0 up, we get in our shape well. I think is there only one game this season? I think that was Wolves away, and that was a last-minute penalty where we've actually not won when we've gone ahead. So we're looking, to me, like, we calmed down a bit and we look, pretty steady. Even Everton away, I know we lost 1-0, but that was a late goal. And I thought second half, we defended really well in that game. And I was disappointed we didn't come away with a point. Not because we played that well, just because I thought we nullified Everton's threat by that point. And then there's other times where the Villa game at the weekend, and it was like after you, Claude, for that, they should have been 3-0 up at half time, to be honest. And for the 2 Grealish goal, I was listening to it because I was actually away in Ireland on New Year's Day, so I couldn't get to the game. And he said that was Villa's first headed goal of the season, or it would have been Aston Villa's first headed goal of the season. And Grealish has just ghosted in there, and no one's near him. And then we've not learnt our lessons. And then Wesley's got absolutely acres of space to slam it in. So like Tom was saying, I think our back four, when they're playing well, are very good. But then at times they've looked awfully exposed. And if you go back to even at the start of the season, a lot of the goals that we've conceded have been when we've given the ball away in midfield, or like when Charlie Taylor give the ball away. That's, you can't really blame anybody else there. So I'm always confident when we go 1-0 up that we'll actually defend well. But if we go 1-0 down at the moment, we just, I won't say we completely give up, but we just like go into our shell, and we never really look like getting back into the game. I just go to the two fullbacks. I start with left back first. I think personally, Taylor's a very good player. It was his fault for the goal against Man United, but I do have a little bit of sympathy for him. I think because he is a quality footballer and he wants to get the ball down and play, he was maybe looking for somebody to pass to because he was just sick of hoofing it and giving the ball away. And ultimately, he did end up wasting too much time on the ball. But he's a good player. He drives forward. Can be an attacking threat. Links with McNeil well. Peters, to me, is just simply not good enough. He's not good enough at this level anymore. How he played for so long was beyond me. And you're going back to that Tottenham game, him and Lowton were fullbacks, same as Sheffield United, and they got ripped to shreds. Lowton's been a great player for us. He has some nice touches on the ball, but again, his confidence has seemed to have gone. And his pace has gone, and he's quite weak. If someone just runs at him one-on-one who's got a bit of pace and skill, he just gets beat far too easily. And I prefer Bardsley at the moment over the two because I think he is a bit more of a solid defender. But when you play Bardsley, you've got no real class on the ball. It's just all brute force. So I think left back we're all right going forward with Taylor, but we desperately need a right back, and we've needed one for a few years. And we just don't, seem to be active enough in the transfer market.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with your views, Richard, that Bardsley's the man for that position at the moment. I'm a huge fan of Matt Lowton, and it's a shame really that he seems to have fallen out of favour. But when you looked at the cup game at home to the Posh when we played them, he had an absolute shocker for their first goal when he just. And you kind of felt, didn't you, that Lowton's career with Burnley was maybe over now? Do you think that's a little bit dramatic to think that, or do you think there is time? Do you think there is an opportunity for him to fight his way back in? Because I agree with you. Whilst we look defensively more solid under Bardsley, we're just missing that link-up play really badly that Lowton brings.
Yeah, it's hard to say whether his Burnley's career is over. Like, he's just not played well for a run of games, and he keeps making basic mistakes that shouldn't be happening at this level. I know you need a squad. I think what will probably happen is, or what I hope will happen, I think Bardsley's out of contract at the end of the year. I think we'll say our goodbyes to him, and hopefully we get a good young up-and-coming right back like we did with Taylor, and then Lowton can be a squad player, which I don't mind doing, but they've both got strengths, they've both got weaknesses, Lowton and Bardsley, but ultimately they're both not good enough. And that's a position that we really need to replace.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like Dyche has this fallback position in him, and I would stress here, I'm not criticising this because I think sometimes you need to go to this, but it seems to go back to Bardsley whenever the chips are a bit down and we're going through a particularly tough period. And it's that just defensive head, isn't it, that Dyche often gets criticised for, the anti-football nature in us. We are missing the forward play and the crosses and the more speed, actually. I think Lowton is quicker than Bardsley going forward anyway. And he does tend to panic a little bit when things are going bad and defaults to that person who can just defend resolutely. And that does come at the expense of some creativity. Tom, back to you then. In terms of that creativity, one thing that I think has been massively obvious throughout the Christmas period, and you yourself touched on this in your opening piece, is just the lack of a midfield that we seem to have at the moment. Taking aside at the moment the lack of options in midfield, we have got some injuries. We have inexplicably, depending on what side of the fence you sit on, let Drinkwater go back to Chelsea, who have now gone to Villa. There's no fight for places. There's no options in midfield. And it feels like all that's happening now is that we're just completely bypassing that midfield, hoofing the ball from defence to try and get to Wood or Barnes to either run onto or take down, inevitably lose possession and then just have to defend again. Do you think that's fair? And if well, what can we do about it? How can we get our midfield more involved?
Yeah, I think that is fair, and I think we've been doing that for a lot of the season as well. I think even in the some of the games we've won, I think perhaps not so much the West Ham game, and I think there are some games at home where teams sit back a little bit. I think if Cork and Westwood do get a bit of time in the middle of the park, if they're allowed to push up a little bit, then they're good at doing what they need to do, which is recycle it out wide, get it out to the wingers. You won't see them arriving on the end of crosses, but as long as they're not being pressed, then they can do that basic job well enough. I think the real difference that we're seeing, I think, is that earlier in the season, as I say, these big balls are going to Wooden Barnes. They're winning them. They're doing something with them. They're buying these little free kicks that Westwood can play. And then, as Rich said earlier, if we nick a goal from one of them free kicks, we've been very good this season at sitting on that. I think the reason that the midfield, the lack of sort of depth and quality in the midfield has really shown up in the last few games is because Wood and Barnes have gone so far off the boil that you're not really noticing that the reason that we can't retain possession isn't so much that that it's them two. It's that we don't have that going through the midfield. And before we've had an up ball, we've had the big ball going up to the strikers. We've been able to disguise the fact that we're bypassing the midfield because it's getting held up in the final third because we're winning these free kicks. Now we're not getting anything from the front two. That's when you start looking at the midfield, and those fingers are starting to be pointed. And it's never been a midfield that you're going to get a load of quality out of. But if we haven't got it coming from centre forward, then we need them to step up, and I just don't think they've got the quality to do it. You could argue maybe Hendrick's a bit more of a ball carrier than either of them, but then he's a bit of a lightweight in the middle, and some of the performances he's put in recently on the right-hand side, I know it's not his position, but I mean, the Man United game, I thought he was absolutely awful in that game. So it's not as if he's playing himself into the team. Thought he did all right in the cup game, and you saw that there is that potential for the midfield in the cup game against Peterborough. I mean, they came in, they showed us far too much respect. They sat off as they let us play, but and I know obviously they're only a League One team, but you did see that we have got quality there. You know, you had Lennon moving inside, and some of the passes he was playing were fantastic. Hendrick was a bit further forward than you normally see one of our central midfielders, and he got himself a goal when he was involved in a lot as well. So there is that potential maybe for a bit of a better midfield, a bit more ball retention in the middle of midfield, a bit more quality in the middle of midfield, but not enough really. So for me, the answer is either we've got to spend on a midfielder, which it doesn't look like we're going to do. We can look at maybe going to a 3 in midfield, and maybe either moving McNeil inside and having Cork and Westwood sitting, and then you get that bit of quality in the middle with McNeil. The downside to that is obviously because we've got so few numbers. If we've only got 3 midfielders in the squad, it's quite hard to play a consistent midfield 3 from game to game, especially with McNeil looking as tired as he is as well. The other option is try and get the front 2 back into some sort of form and get an out ball. And I think Wood is personally, I think Wood's been playing all right, even in these bad games. I think with Wood, it's just been a lack of service. I think when he's had the ball, as I said earlier, I don't think he's great back to goal, but when he's had it, he has worked. He's put himself about. He's been involved. I think Barnes has just been a non-entity in the last month. And if we're hearing that he's playing with an injury, I mean, it's very obvious. So why that hasn't been addressed in some way, whether that's by dropping him, sending him for if he needs an operation or something like that, sending him for that. But I think to me it looks obvious Rodriguez needs to come back into the team now, and he needs a run as well. Barnes, if it is injury or whether it's form, either way, he shouldn't be anywhere near that team for me at the minute. And maybe if you bring Rodriguez in, you've got a player who's better at dropping a bit deeper, at linking up with the midfield. Maybe that gives you another option as well. Someone with a bit more technical quality as well. I don't think he's as good at holding the ball up as Barnes, but if you get some balls into the corner for him to chase, if you can get some balls into feet for him, then maybe that's a different outlet as well. So there's a few options for us. I think the best option is to spend a bit of money, but obviously we're probably going to need to look at the fallback options there as well. So it'll be interesting to see if and how we address that on Saturday.
Let's move into that now, because that does bring us on to quite an interesting challenge, I guess. Richard, we'd not even got to the end of the 1st of January. day one of the winter transfer window being opened, where the club essentially came out and said that incomings were unlikely this January transfer window. I guess deep down we were all expecting that, but that was a kick in the teeth, wasn't it, for all of us? Where do we even start with that? It's added to quite a, not depressed, but quite a down feeling from all Burnley fans, in that we knew that Christmas was going to be tough. We knew we were going through a challenging spell in terms of games. We knew we had injuries, but we always thought, well, we didn't strengthen in summer. We put this record bid in for a player which we were led to believe was around 20 million in July, which didn't happen. So we've all been thinking, well, we can just strengthen in January, we can get cover where we need it, and that's apparently not going to happen. And on top of that, we've sent Danny Drinkwater back to Chelsea, and over the Christmas period, he did feature in was it the City game he played? I think it was City, wasn't it? That he played, but hasn't played since. So, Richard, kick us off with this transfer debacle, and let's see where we get to.
I'll mention the Drinkwater point first. When we signed him, I was really excited. I thought, like, it's going to be a really good partner either for Westwood, or it gives us the option to play free midfield. But for me, I genuinely don't blame Dyche for sending him back. Obviously, there was an incident that was really unsavoury when he signed for the club, and it took him, good best part of 3 months to get fully fit, and it just didn't work out. So I don't blame Dyche for that one. You've got to keep standards in the squad. But then what frustrated me, he's off the wage bill, and then we're saying signings are unlikely. And it was just like a double whammy. We were so poor against Villa, so poor over the Christmas period. Surely Dyche, Garlic, whoever's in charge of the transfers has got to be watching that, thinking, right, we need at least 2 or 3 players here, just to freshen up the team. And, just to say that they're unlikely or highly unlikely again, it's just so frustrating. It's just the same old spiel time after time. I think they think us as fans are stupid, that we'll just believe anything that we say. And, I think we don't want us to go out and spend 40 million on one player and pay him 150 grand a week. We just want to be a little bit more ambitious in the transfer market, not just in terms of the money spent, but in terms of the type of players that, we're scouting and looking at. There is good players in Europe. You've got Buendia for Norwich, who's, had a really good vein of form. He cost next to nothing for Norwich. There are players out there. We're just looking in the same, circles again. Maybe loan players from the Premier League or players from the Championship, etc. And we all know players from the Championship, they just get inflated prices. So for me, it's just really frustrating. I don't think we're that far off from having, a sustainable, good team that can come mid-table in the Premier League. I think we need a right back, a central midfielder definitely starting, and with Gudmundsson's fitness, we need another winger. So they've been talking about our recruitment in Europe, how it's growing and whatnot, but again, to me, nothing seems to be happening there. And you've got Mike, is it Mike Rigg or whatever his name is, who's come in. He's supposed to be, recommending these players. So is it him who's not doing his job, or is he recommending these players to Dyche, and Dyche is saying no? So I don't think it's just the board. I think Dyche is almost like too particular with what he wants. And I was having a chat with my dad about it. Is Dyche almost scared to sign these technical players because he doesn't know what to do with them? Does he think, if we sign someone who's got a technical ability, and who has got a bit more flair and creativity, I'm not going to sign him because I don't actually know how to coach him. So for me, the way we're playing at the moment, our transfer policy in terms of the money spent, who the players that we're looking at, I'm getting to the point more and more where I won't say I'm getting like disillusioned with it, but just my frustration's growing all the time. And I think that first half performance against Villa for me was a bit of a turning point, because I'm getting a bit sick of these performances and the excuses all the time coming from the top hierarchy at the club.
Yeah, I don't blame you, Richard, and I certainly got a sense of that frustration where the fans were not necessarily turning, but they were losing patience with the repetitive nature of the excuses and just the same cycle that we seem to be getting in. just to put it into context, I think for me, this transfer, I don't know, ban or whatever they're going to call it for January, the fact that the incomings were unlikely, the justification for it is that there weren't any finances available to be able to spend. Now, that to me doesn't seem to rack up, and both of you have alluded to this in your pieces there. We've banked, and I thank Jamie Smith for summarising this in his tweet, actually. I'm taking this from him because it put all of the information together. 55 million profits been banked in the current Premier League era. So that's not just one season, that's over the seasons we've been there. We put a club record bid in August, which we believe was around 18 to 20 million, something like that, for a player, which was rejected. So we had that money available to spend just 6 months ago. And we've essentially spent nothing in the last 18 months. So the message to come out to say that finances are tight and we don't have the financial model in place to be able to spend in this January transfer window doesn't add up. It genuinely doesn't add up. And again, Mike Rigg, who was brought in, was supposed to be in charge of recruitment. It was a long-term recruitment. He's got quite a decorated career behind him, and he's worked with some really big clubs in getting their recruitment policy and their scouting network up to date. He's just been invisible, and he's not really, certainly from the fan perspective, and listeners, this is all we can comment on because none of us work in the club, and the very nature of fan-led pieces is that we have to speculate on the information that is made public to us because we don't have anything else to go on. But from a fan perspective, he's been invisible for all the time he's been here. And then the Burnley Express, Chris Bowden promised us a piece with Sean Dyche on the Mike Rigg situation, which I just thought was bizarre. I didn't understand the piece. I didn't understand what the intention was. I couldn't make my mind up whether they were setting him up to be the fall guy, whether or not they were justifying just not spending any money, or whether it was just the same old nonsense coming out about player recruitment. But some of the comments that Dyche said is that he believed that Mike Rigg was finding the challenge harder than he thought. Well, I'm not really sure what they promised him when he came in then. But weirdly, they said that he's actually identifying plenty of targets, but those targets don't fit our financial model. Well, then they're not targets then. And that to me would just screamed of two parties being completely on the wrong pages. It's like, if he's been with the club 18 months now, and he's been put in charge of recruitment all the way across, and he wants to bring in identify about 400 players across all of the age groups and across all of the positions, and he's identifying all of these targets, and the club are saying, no, that's completely out of our model. What on earth have they been talking about for the last 18 months? How are they so far away in terms of agreeing what the job is here? We don't seem to be going into Europe, as Richard quite rightly said. We seem to be just fishing in the same pond all the time and buying Stoke rejects. And then I guess to kind of, I know, Richard, you don't agree with this, and you were quite happy to see Drinkwater go back. But Villa have snapped him up straight away, and that's now being lauded as a fantastic opportunity for Drinkwater. And they're in a really precarious position themselves. And, you know, what if Drinkwater goes there now, gets the right manager who actually plays him, and he keeps them up at our expense? I get that's dramatic, but these are real repercussions of real stubbornness in our transfer window. Tom, let's bring you back in on this. I don't know whether you read that. I'm assuming you did because you read everything. That Sean Dyche interview and just the weirdness about it. Do you think that there is something not quite right in terms of the club, and what do you think Dyche's role in those transfers is? Richard alluded to this, and he said he wondered whether, was Mike Rigg identifying these players and Dyche was just saying no. Do we think that we are perhaps being hampered by Dyche's insistence on being involved in every single aspect of the club now? I understand that might be a difficult thing to think about, But that's one of the things we've always prided ourselves on, is that Dyche runs a club inside out. Are we seeing a downside of that model now?
I think with regard to that, it swings and roundabouts, because you've seen some of the players that we've bought in the last couple of years, not just Drinkwater, Gibson, Vidra, the players that we've brought in for a sizable amount of money by our standards and haven't played. And I think the danger is if you take the transfers out of Dyche's hands completely and say, look, we need X, Y, Z in midfield, we're bringing them in, and you haven't got the final say on them. Is he going to play them? He doesn't play the ones that he's apparently signed. So I can see as just doing more of that. If you were to take it out of his hands completely, I think he's got to have some input in the process. And in fairness, probably over his whole tenure, I think probably overall we've done better than we have badly in terms of signings. We've had a couple of players that we've bought for very little and sold for a lot, and we'll probably make substantial profits on someone like Tarkowski, Nick Pope, even McNeil will make a lot of money on him, I should think. So it's not as if his record's completely disastrous, but it certainly has been in the last couple of years. And I think it's coincided with the point where we're having to start spending the big money in order to improve the team. So in the past, when we've been in the Prem, we can buy a Westwood for $3.5 million and he can get in the team. I think we ended up paying, was it about 6 or 7 million or something for Taylor and a Tribunal. Wood 15 million is probably about pushing the limits of where we have been in the last few years. And I think now if we're going to sign players who are going to improve the team, we're looking at 20, 25 million, maybe even 25. And that seems to be where the sticking point is. So I think you mentioned the tweet that Jamie Smith sent out earlier, which really summed it up really well for me as well. The point that he was making, I think, was that if we had this 20 million that Mike Garlick talked about, I think it's believed to have been Calvin Phillips as well that we were bidding for. So we know what position we're looking at. We're looking at the base of midfield. Excuse me, sorry. We're looking at someone who can get the foot on the ball and spray it out from the base of midfield. So it's not like we don't know what we need. If we had 20 million to spend at the end of August and we didn't get him for whatever reason, then why haven't we got 20 million to spend now on somebody else? And if we have got 20 million to spend, why have we gone from the start of September to the start of January without identifying that player, without doing a bit of groundwork, without seeing who's available? Without, I know it's not, you shouldn't be doing it, but I think realistically, we know every club is going to put the feelers out and speak to agents and find out what a realistic fee would be and what wages they'd want and that kind of thing. I don't know if necessarily the fault there is Dyche or Rigg. I think the problem is the scouting network. And Richard mentioned earlier that we don't seem to sign anybody from abroad. I saw a good tweet. I think it was Jamie Crowther. Apologies if I've got that wrong. He was mentioning the last sort of players that we've bought direct from abroad that have gone on to be successful. And I think there was 3 names, the last 3, and one of them was Drissa Diallo, which tells you how long it's been since we've really got good foreign recruits. And the only one we've had in Dyche's time has been Stephen Defoe. And, he was a good signing. We picked him up for a song. Obviously, that was because of his injury problems, and obviously it wasn't an unmitigated success because of that. But that was a signing that got the fans excited. That was a signing that didn't cost the earth. It improved the first 11, gave us a bit of quality that we didn't have before. What is it about that bit of business that we can't recreate? Why were we able to scout him and we've not been able to scout others in that sort of situation? And I suppose I wouldn't pin it all on Dyche. I don't think the problem is necessarily just him. Obviously, he's got to take his share of the responsibility, but it's all aspects of the club. It's Dyche, it's Rigg, it's the board, it's the money that they're willing to release, it's how far they're willing to push the envelope, and it's the scouting network as well. And I don't know who's ultimately responsible for putting that in place, whether that is Dyche, Rigg, the board, or a combination of all 3. But there's clearly failings at a number of levels, and they've been going on for a few transfer windows now. I think the last player that we bought who's a regular first team or who's played a significant amount of first team games was Taylor, and that was 2 years ago. So there really has got to be question marks over that. I think even if we don't get anyone in this window, we're going to limp over the line, but the squad's aging. Good players are being sold and not replaced. people we're bringing in aren't playing, and at some point there is going to have to be a big overhaul because we haven't been making those gradual improvements in the window. And are we going to have the money to make a big overhaul? It's a question that they all need to sit down and discuss, and it's something that we really need answers to quite quickly.
Yeah, some really good points in that, Tom. I think highlighting some of the key points for me is the fact that it is an ageing squad. I've been saying that for about 18 months now. I could see this on the horizon, and I think fans could see this point coming. If we keep being consistently told that the money isn't there, then there's absolutely no reason to suspect that that money will be released to do a full overhaul of the squad. It just feels like we are petering away until we finally are done. This cycle of players is wound up and we just go back down to the Championship and start again. That's what it feels like to me that the club is doing. It doesn't feel like they want to play the Premier League merry-go-round. They want to just get up there, spend what they've spent, let it run its course for as long as possible. Then once those players have done, we fall down a division, we get loads of cheap players in, and we just stay in the Championship until we can start again, and we start the whole cycle again. Now, let's be realistic here. That model might apply regardless of how much money you spend. There are teams at the moment that are doing the cycle of Championship up to Premier League for quite a number of seasons now, and it might be that that's going to happen regardless of how much money you spent. Look at how much Norwich spent last year. Look at how much Fulham, not Norwich, sorry. Look how much Fulham spent last year. They, didn't work for them. They didn't gel at all, and they went straight the way back down. Middlesbrough a couple of years ago when they came up, they were splashing the cash around. It didn't work for them. So maybe our board are just general geniuses and just say, well, what's the point? We're going to waste all of that money, and we're going to go down anyway in the natural Premier League cycle. Who knows? Richard, a couple of final points on the transfer window for you. One is a question and two is a consideration. Question, which I think will probably be a yes or no answer. Do you think that this is potentially just an absolute PR masterpiece by our club and by Dyche, and to completely hustle the market to let them believe straight on that we've got no money, but actually they are working hard in the background to try and get some players on the cheap, and they just don't want to advertise the fact that they're in the market because prices get completely hyped up? So that's question number one. Question number two, a lot of fans on social media are offering their managerial expertise as to what players we should be getting rid of to free up the wage bill to bring in new players. Do you have any players in the current squad who you would happily see go in this January transfer window to free those up?
So, yeah, your first question, I'll be, I do still think they're looking at players, but because they've not said, no, we're definitely not signing anyone. And I do think if a player comes up at the right value, but everything's got to be perfect for them to sign someone. They don't seem to just want to take a little bit of a gamble on a player who might be young or might be a little bit more money, or coming from a foreign league. So I think they are looking, and me personally, I think we'll get somebody on loan to replace Drinkwater later on in the transfer window. But who knows what the quality of that player would be. Obviously, there's been mentions of Conor Gallagher, who's currently at Charlton on loan from Chelsea, but they said he's not coming back. A player that I'd like to look for, and I've heard he's going to come back from RB Leipzig, would be Ethan Ampadu. It's like a holding midfielder, and he can play box to box too. And when I've watched him for Wales in particular, I thought he's been excellent, and I've always thought he's a player who I think would be really good for us. There's a lot of talk about Jayden Bogle, but I've not seen too much of him. But in terms of players that we could let go, there seems a lot of noise that we're looking at Scott McKenna from Aberdeen. And actually, when we actually played Aberdeen in those two legs, I thought he was a standout player for them. And he's only 23, and they're talking about 6 million. So say if we can recoup, what we did for Gibson and get him in, I think that's a decent bit of business. I don't see, if we can get money in for Gibson, I don't see the point in us keeping him at all, because he's not going to play. He doesn't want to be here. He posts stuff about Middlesbrough all the time on his social media, so he's clearly, his heart's not in being at Burnley. It's just about getting the right bid. For me, we might as well get rid of Vidra, because even if we've got no strikers, he's not going to play. So you're looking there, you could easily get close to 20 million for those two players. You put Naki Wells in the mix, who's scoring goals in the Championship. I'm not having all this about recalling him. I don't think he'd be good enough at this level. There's still a massive gulf between the Premier League and the Championship. You could get a few million for him. So, and then for me, get rid of Hart, but it seems like no one would take him even if it was a free. I've heard he's on massive money. So say if you got rid of Hart and you've got rid of Drinkwater, that could free up, I don't know, maybe like 70, 80,000 pound worth of money a week on players. So all this saying that the one thing that annoys me, there are finances there to sign players. It's nonsense. Whether it is a good loan player or 5 million on a young player, or like Tom was saying, Calvin Phillips, we bid 20 million for him. So all this stuff about finance, to me, that's just an out and out lie. If they come out and they were just saying, we don't think the right players are available in January, or we're willing to, wait till the summer, we've identified targets, but they'll become available in the summer, or if one does come up that we want, yeah, we'll put a bid in. But to say, we've not got the finances to sign anyone at all after they get rid of Drinkwater, even if they sell players, because we can do. So that's what, out of everything in that interview, like with Dyche and, that was talking about on the Burnley Express, I think that was the point that frustrated me more than any.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the press that you read, I don't know whether or not this is just news fillers or not clickbait in the negative sense, but obviously local journalists especially have got to keep their columns filled for the rest of the month. And if the club are going to write off completely the transfer window on the 1st of January, they've got a lot of columns to fill with nothing. So a lot of them seem to be going on the line of, Burnley have said that transfers incoming are unlikely, but that's not to mean that they're not looking in the background. And you're probably right, they probably are. There's the word negligent is being banded around social media quite a lot at the moment, definitely directed towards our board, about how they are handling the transfers. And I do think it would just be, I think if genuinely they are not even in the market looking for any replacements or trying to do these deals, then we've got a bigger problem than we think we are. So I'm going to work on the assumption that they are looking. It's just they're trying to shut down speculation and shut down the conversation now. Tom, back to you then. So we'll finish off this welcome back podcast. I didn't want to concentrate too much on the games and the performances because a lot of it felt very down, and I didn't want to start the new year being all like, albeit we have then whinged about the transfer window, so it's not been the most uplifting one. But the cup game at home against the Posh was actually a nice break from the difficulties being faced in the Premier League at the moment, and a very convincing victory by our second team for as much as they were, albeit marred by the injury to JBG, which is a massive blow. But it felt nice, didn't it, for the cup game to not only be in the hat for the next round, and we've got Norwich at home, which is a great draw, one I'm really looking forward to, but just to be able to go out there and play with that freedom.
Yeah, I touched on it earlier. I think Peterborough will be disappointed with the way they approached it. I think they showed us far too much respect. They were really deep. They let us play our football. But having said that, if we've got the opportunity, then you can only beat what's put in front of you. And I wasn't looking forward to the game before. I was pretty pessimistic. I had a bit of money on Peterborough. I made a bit of money betting on Sunderland in the League Cup game earlier this season, so I followed that up. But it was a bad shout this time. Yeah, we dismantled and we played some really nice stuff. Lennon played really well. I think he was the best player on the pitch by a mile. The midfield looked a bit freer. Rodriguez chipping in with a couple more goals, staking a claim to be in the first team. And yeah, it was a bit of an antidote for the doom and gloom that's been around. People say that it can disrupt your momentum if you put a weakened team out for the cup. But the team that we put out actually was pretty strong. I think when you look back, the starting 11 had 10 internationals in 5 England internationals. So probably an indication that the squad's not as weak as it has been in previous years, and we've had some of these really bad cup results. The performance was really good. Hopefully that will put a bit of a spring in the step of all the players. As you say, it's a good draw in the next round as well, another home game and another winnable game. If you get through to round 5, you get another decent home draw. Suddenly you're in the quarterfinals. I think the last time we were in the quarterfinals was 2003. So hopefully, if we can put a bit of a cup run together this year, then it might just be a bit of an antidote for the doom and gloom that's surrounded the league form at the minute. Might put a bit of a spring into the step of the fans and the players, give us something to look forward to. It might end up being a positive. And if we put in a few more performances like we did against Peterborough, obviously I know there's the big caveat that it was Peterborough, and like I said, they didn't play particularly well either. But hopefully that will give us some confidence at the very least.
Do you think we can beat Norwich in the fourth round, Tom? I think we gave them a real show of experience at Turf. That was in one of the hazy days of the opening games of the season, and it's gone slightly different for both sides, I think, since then. But I don't think they will come with a full strength side. I think away at Burnley, another Premier League tie, and a team that have already comprehensively beaten them once this season at that same ground. They've got a huge survival battle on their hands. I fully expect us to get past that and be in the fifth round draw, don't you?
Yeah, I think they're in a similar boat to us in that it's not their priority. They won't bring the first team. Like I said, I think they had Preston away, didn't they, in the last round, and that Irish lad got a hat trick for them, the young lad. But I think he was aided massively by an absolute shocker from Preston's keeper, and obviously Preston are in a bit of dire form themselves. I think that's 3 defeats at home on the spin now. So yeah, I don't think they'll be busting a gut to beat us. I think they'll be in the position where they think, if we lose, then at least we can concentrate on the league for the rest of the season. Whereas we, even though we're in really poor form and we've got a difficult run of fixtures, we have got a bit of a cushion on the bottom 3. We're not looking doomed like they are. So I think we can afford perhaps a little bit more to have a cup run. And then, as I say, the other thing is the team that we'll put out. If we put the same team out that we're doing against Peterborough, then it's going to be a strong team as well. So yeah, every confidence that we can win that. And who knows? Hopefully not Man City away in the 5th round.
That would be nice. I fully expected that to be the draw when it happened. I was just waiting for the first ball to come out, being Manchester City at home, but luckily we got out there before they did. Richard, Tom did mention there that we have got a cushion on the bottom 3 and it's not as doom and gloom as it is for Norwich. However, that comes with a bit of a caveat, and taking aside the distraction of the FA Cup for a while, our next 9 Premier League games are nothing short of horrible. I'm pretty sure that every listener has already got this on their radar, but let me just talk you through our next 9 fixtures. Chelsea away, Leicester at home, United away, Norwich that's the FA Cup 4th round. Arsenal at home. Then we have so that's the next 4 games are Chelsea, Leicester, United and Arsenal. Ouch. Then we have a bit of a respite where we have Southampton, Bournemouth and Newcastle. I think the Southampton and Newcastle games are both away and Bournemouth's at home. And then we're straight back into it when we've got the final 2 of Spurs at home and City away. Now, Richard, with the best will in the world, it very much looks like we're not even going to be able to start thinking about picking some points up until around the 15th of February when we play Southampton at home. And that's not going to be an easy game, particularly with how much Danny's on fire. We could easily find ourselves in the bottom 3 by the time we play Southampton. That cushion in that Premier League isn't going to be around for much longer. And I'm a little bit worried about these 9 games. Can we realistically see us getting many points out of those 9 games? Because that is going to put us in a whole world of trouble if not.
I think looking 9 games ahead, considering we've played 20 games this season so far, I think I don't think you can really look too far ahead. I think if you start looking too far ahead into 9 games, I think you start getting muddled thinking. I've been quite negative on the podcast so far about stuff that's gone on behind the scenes, which will still remain even if we pick up a few points in these games. But what I would say is, because of our squad and Dyche's reluctance to rotate, when we have, say, 3 games in a short period of time, so I'm going back to when we played Palace, City. It was the other team we played. We played Palace, City and someone else, and we lost 3 on the bounce. And then
it was Spurs that week.
Yeah.
Spurs.
And we won 2 on a row. So obviously over Christmas, we have been quite poor and we've lost 3 on a row. I'm not going to say we're going to beat Chelsea and Leicester, but I think hopefully, we're not having to play game after game. If there's any niggling injuries, or Dyche can hopefully get them on the training ground and get them looking more solid again. I don't really, I would break it down into these 4 games against the 4 bigger clubs. I don't really fear Arsenal at home. They've been poor away from home for a long time. I know they've got Arteta, but we can still make it difficult for them. I'm going in reverse order. United away, I don't know what Burnley's going to turn up. every time I've watched United this season, other than City away, they've looked poor to me. Even that second half, when we actually had a go against United, we did cause them problems. Leicester at home, I think, will be tough, and I think this Chelsea away will be tough. But last season we proved, when we rolled our sleeves up, we managed to get a couple of goals there and get a draw. And I don't think and if you look at it, they've lost at home this season to Bournemouth and West Ham when they've been on really bad runs. So I don't think it's a lost cause. Hopefully Dyche can get them back on the training ground, get them back well drilled and get them up for the fight. Because, we do need it in these next few games. I still think we'll have enough to stay up this season. I still think they'll be over the course. We've still got 18 games left. I think we'll have enough to stay up. We look at it now, we've got 24 points. I know that 40-point mark's the golden, number that you want to get to. So that's only another 16 points. I think realistically, what do we need in 18 games? 4 wins, 5 wins, which is more than doable. So, I think with the points tally we've got, and we have got a little bit of a cushion, and Bournemouth's not in good form. Norwich to me are down already. They concede too many goals. Watford's won, which could still stay up. Villa's obviously lost, McGinn, Heaton, Wesley, who are big players. So, yeah, it's been a really bad spell, and there's big issues behind the scenes that won't go away even if we stay up this season. Like you said, are we going to, even if we stay up this season, we're going to go down next season. But I still think with what we've done in the first half of the season, we'll have enough points to stay up. I just want to see us going back to when we had them first few games of the season, even Leicester away when we lost. We got the ball down and we passed it a bit more. So hopefully against Chelsea, they don't like playing Burnley. Hopefully we can get under the skin a little bit, and even if we lose, let's just put in a bit of fighting performance and show what, that pride that Burnley's associated with, and put a bit of blood, sweat and tears back into that claret shirt.
Oh, do you know what, Richard? I could not have said that better myself. That is so, so important. I think one of the things that highlighted the disappointing phase we're in at the moment was that injury time against Villa. We got 9 minutes injury time because of the injuries and all of the stoppages and the VAR decisions that we had in the game. We were 2-1 down at home against a team in 18th who we desperately needed to at least not let them win or get a point from. And we spent about 6 of the 9 minutes just mindlessly passing the ball sideways and backwards in our own half without any momentum whatsoever to try and get an equalising goal. And that, to me, just sums up that lack of fight that you're talking about, Richard. This is a Sean Dyche side. This is a side that has Ben Mee, who puts his head on somebody's boot on the line to stop a goal going in. It's a side that works for each other and never knows when it's beat. And we've just not seen that over the last couple of months. And that's the side that we need to get back. Tom, last word from you then. Do you share Richard's optimism? Do you think we've got enough in the tank to stay up this season? Or do you think we're doomed? You can't say doomed in January, but let's say, are we going to have a very tough running, or do you share Richard's view that we've got enough?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a procession. I think it'll be ugly at times. I think probably looking at the set of fixtures, I think we're going to get closer to the bottom 3 before we get further away. But I think we've had a good enough first half of the season. As Richard said, I think we need probably 5, maybe 6 wins, but I think we're good enough to get them. I think we've got enough winnable games at home. I think we've got enough about us to nick the odd away game. And I think we'll get over the line, and I think the summer's going to be a big one. But for this season, I share Richard's confidence. I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of having these 9 games coming up that are absolutely horrific is that the running towards the end of the season actually looks great. One of the things I tend to do when the fixtures come out is look for the last 6 or 7 games at the end of the season, because that can often dictate, if you're in the bottom 3 and you desperately need 4 points, or sort of 4 or 5 points to survive, and you're playing United, Leicester, Liverpool, City in the last 4 games, for example, then you're absolutely knackered. Our running looks like it's games that we should be fighting in and we can win. So it's a hat trick from me. I'm worried. I share Richard's concerns that there's stuff not quite gelling in the background, and share Tom's concerns about the ageing squad and the lack of transfers. But I agree with both of them that we should have enough in our tanks to be able to get us over the line. Tom, Richard, do either of you have any other points that you want to cover in our welcome to the new year catch-up session, or do you think we've covered all the points that we needed to in this ugly phase of the season?
Yeah, just last one from me. I think we can all voice our frustrations, and everyone's got a right to boo, and especially at half time against Villa. But I just, there's a lot of stuff about Dyche wanting to go, which I still think is nonsense. Dyche goes, who'd you get in? The team, you can tell, even though our first half performances haven't been great, even the second half we've come out against United and Villa, we have give it a good go and ultimately have lacked a bit of quality, which shows to me that the players are still together. So, we've had a bad Christmas. We've had a bit of time off from the Premier League. A nice win against Peterborough, which was enjoyable. Let's just, hopefully we get some at Chelsea, but even if we don't, against Leicester, it'll be a tough game. Let's just get right behind the players and make Turf Moor that intimidating atmosphere again.
Yeah, let's do that. And guys, we know it's hard. We've seen the comments, we've seen the feedback where you're saying that the players have got to give it back, give us something to cheer for. But somebody's going to have to give, and why not us? Why not just get on there and say, right, guys, enough is enough. We've had this horrible spell. We're in this together. Richard's absolutely right. We're all going to give blood, sweat and tears for that shirt, from the board to Dyche to the coaching staff to the guys who serve as our Benny and Hot at half time. We're all in it together. So this is going to be the start of a new phase for Burnley now. We're going to get rid of this disappointing Christmas period. And when we join you next week, we're going to have a fantastic win away at Chelsea to talk about. I'm quite sure of it. That is all we have got time for this week. I'm glad you're all back. I'm glad we're back. It's a new year. We will be back as normal into our weekly routine with the main podcast. So myself and the rest of the panel, Liam, George and Robbie, or a combination of those guys, will be back next week. Statman Dave and I will be back on Friday for the preview show. My thanks as ever go to producer Matt for knitting this all together and getting it out for you. And a big thanks especially for all of his hard work over the Christmas period. He really had to jump in and out getting preview shows done for that congested fixture. So Matt, we very much appreciate it. Thank you. And my thanks to band Joyce, who provide our backing music for the podcast. Thanks to Tom and Richard for that really difficult podcast today. Actually, we've asked them to come on and really, I guess, share their frustrations, but try and keep it upbeat. And it's a lot to ask for fans to come on. I know we open ourselves up to a lot of criticism and people get on our backs if we start being too negative. But, there's a reality about where we are at the moment. And I thought both Tom and Richard just gave some really balanced and some really sensible views there. So guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate you giving your time. Thanks as ever, finally go to you, the listener, for downloading and listening to this podcast. Your support is very much appreciated and we would not be here without you. And as a reward for that loyalty, you should keep your ears to the ground, because No Nay Never is going to be working with, in collaboration with the Turfcast podcast over the next week or so, to bring you a very special podcast with the one and only Ian Wright, in celebration of it being 20 years since he pulled on that famous claret and blue shirt. He has agreed to come on both our podcasts and give the listeners some historic feedback about what it was like to be a claret and just exactly what Stan Turnant said to him to convince him to come to Burnley. So fingers crossed, everybody, keep your fingers, toes on, put your lucky bad Bob Beats or whatever they were called that Robbie Blake used to wear, just to keep your fingers crossed that we'll be able to get that over the line and keep your eye out for that. If you want to get in touch with us, you know how to, usual channels, and we'll be back next week. That's everything. I've been Natalie Bromley. This has been the Non Another podcast. Until next time.